Hi, and welcome to the KindlED Podcast, where we dig into the art and science behind kindling the motivation, curiosity, and mental well-being of the young humans in our lives.
Together, we'll discover practical tools and strategies you can use to help kids unlock their full potential and become the strongest version of their future selves. Welcome to the KindlED Podcast. Today is exciting because we have Kelly Smith, the founder and CEO of Prenda, and also, let me see here, the author of A Fire to be Kindled, which is available in book and it's going to be available on Audible and Apple Books.
Kelly, I love that you named your book that, and I feel like we should name a podcast or something after your book.
Credit goes to Plutarch. I'd love to claim it, but it was an idea that has existed for a long time. It's great to be here, you guys. I'm so excited. Thanks for having me on. And I love the work you're doing. I might be the biggest fan of the KindlED Podcast. So, it means a lot that I'm here and that we get to be talking about this stuff, which I love.
So, Katie, do you have any fun stories to share today?
Oh my gosh, you guys are not going to believe this. I don't know if you can see this on my face still because I was scrubbing my face so hard before this. Last night, we have a little game that our girls play. It's called Salon. All they do is they take a paintbrush. You can probably see where this is going. And they just do plain water. And I just lay on the floor. If you are a parent, please play this game with your kids. It's the most enjoyable thing ever. You just lay on the floor and you're at the salon and they just have to take little paintbrushes of clear water and they just paint your arms, they paint your face. It's so relaxing if you like that kind of thing. And we'll play for a half an hour and I'm just loving it, right? And so Maggie, my 4-year-old, was playing solo. My 6-year-old is not participating in this venture. And she just started talking about, I just thought it was a normal game of salon, you guys. And she started talking about how she was preparing me for her birthday party where the theme was blue. And so I just wrapped up this game of salon like it was nothing. And then my husband took a turn too before we realized that she was using legit paint. And I just looked in the mirror and I was just I was blue everywhere.
He was preparing you for Blue Man Group.
Yeah, right. So I hope there's no blue stuff on my face because even though it was just watercolor, it was really hard to get off. But it's a small price to pay to foster her creativity and kindle her love of art. So
Wait, so when it's normal water, you're laying there enjoying the experience? You like the feeling of water being painted on your face?
yeah, it's not a lot of water. It's yeah, I just do. I don't know. Doesn't that sound enjoyable?
It's more the bristles, it's kind of like exfoliating feeling, right?
If someone's scratching your back or something, it's like that with a paintbrush. I don't know. Is that really weird? Maybe that's super weird, but it's a lovely game.
I'm trying to imagine what it might feel like. I get that the kids like it. That part makes sense to me. What's funny is Kim somehow figured out how to get them excited about rubbing lotion into her hands. So stuff like that, which they also enjoyed and she got a kick out of that. So I don't know. I was trying to figure out if this is a two-way street or you're just entertaining, you're being the test dummy for the children to play salon.
Yeah. I mean, I do like to play. It's you can go watch our episode on play and learn how much I hate playing. So this counts as me playing. And I'm like, okay, I can get behind this. This is good.
It's a great story.
Super fun. Okay, let's dive right in, Kelly. So, can you tell us the origin story of Prenda, but start not in 2018, but start when you were in kindergarten?
I feel like it was funny to get the outline for these questions because Katie knows every aspect of my life already. And also, I've told the story of Prenda so many times. So yeah, let's start at kindergarten. Why not? I'm the oldest in my family. I'm not sure that matters, but you kind of inherit this feeling of responsibility. I remember my backpack and the tube socks, I mean, the whole thing, right? And I write about this in the book. Just showing up at kindergarten, not sure what to expect, but wanting so badly to please everyone. And there was this day in kindergarten that just stands out because it shaped really my whole approach to school all the way through high school, which basically was, one of these moments that's insignificant to anyone else. But for me, it was a big deal. I was coloring a piece of paper. They'd given us like the blank sheets and it has the outlines and you color in it, which is a pretty normal activity, I think, for kindergartners. And my teacher came over and looked at me for a while and said, "You're doing it wrong." And I just remember like, "You're doing it wrong," feeling so big, so heavy, so angry. I'm sure it was none of those things, right? As I look back at the story, it's like she was a nice lady, good, like a good, sweet kindergarten teacher. I'm sure she was just like trying to help me improve my coloring technique or something. But the message I got was, "You're bad, you're wrong, you're broken." And I just basically made it a goal in my mind to never get it felt like getting in trouble. And I thought, I never want to get in trouble. So I remember my little brother coming home from school with little like principal tickets, like disciplinary things. And he was also a really tame kid, but for me, I was just horrified. I never got anywhere close. I just, even through, my years of getting older and being more of a smart aleck, it was like I wasn't going to get in trouble. And what I realized now in retrospect is I was allowing that really kind of fear-based frame and a system that existed in a way that, I felt very powerless. I felt like I just had this, I had to engage with the rules around me and I was going to play by those rules. So I did that. I'm proudly, never had a visit to the principal's office. I did get detention one time for chewing gum.
Kelly.
A little bit upset with my friend David if he's here. This guy gives me gum. He's like, "Here, have a piece of gum." I'm like, "Oh, awesome." And then he gets caught with gum 5 minutes later and immediately points at me. He's like, "He has it too."
Yes, come too.
You're coming down with me.
I'm like, "You didn't have to do that." But it taught me the lesson, as I need to take accountability for my own choices. We had to clean gum off of desks after school. So thanks, Ms. Grubka, for the lesson.
Your kindergarten story, actually, I don't know if we've connected these dots yet, but I actually had like almost the exact same kindergarten experience where I was coloring. And I remember I was sitting next to my friend Joshua, and I just had the paper turned fully sideways. I was like doing some weird like move, like physically. And the teacher was like, "Oh, you're doing it like that." And I like felt that like fear of like I am doing something wrong. And then she just said, "That's okay."
Ah.
And like I was able to be like, "Oh, I am okay." Like, so what that teaches me is that like, wow, our reactions to things, like kids are learning all the time and little things matter,
So amazing.
Um,
Yeah, it's funny because the way that I was doing it wrong was I was turning my arm and not the paper. So you were doing it different than me. You would have been praised in my classroom and I would have been
wow.
normal in your classroom. So
It's almost like there's more than one way to do things. Weird.
surprise.
What? So when was it for you? Were you always just, playing this game of school from that moment on to try to make sure you're doing things right and making sure you're coloring within the lines? What did you have this shift and then have the idea of Prenda?
Yeah, I mean, it took a long time. I mean, and frankly, like I think I had to unlearn a lot of things, right? I was so obsessed with playing the game and not getting in trouble, and I found that I was good at it. I mean, from like third grade, I was doing the timed math facts faster than the other kids, and so I'm getting praised for that. And ninth grade, I'm learning the formula for a good essay faster than the other kids, and so I'm getting praised for that. And I quickly realized by senior year, it was like, I know how syllabus works and I know how grades are calculated. And I, figured out exactly what the minimum is I'd have to do to get an A in every class. I got through high school with all A's. I was second in my class because one kid went to a different school and he got one more advanced course than me. And so I didn't get to win, but I was second in my class and all these things, right? That feels like success. I got to college and did kind of, frankly, more of the same. I was sort of navigating a course load and working my way through credits and getting grades. I'm sure I was learning in all of that. I think sometimes I make it sound like I was just, not learning, but I was in a mode of trying to learn the least amount possible because it was like conservation of energy. It's like, how can I get through this? It almost was a point of pride, right? Like there was a class that I figured out I was going to get an A in the class if I stopped showing up. And it was like March, it was months away from the end of the school year. And I just like didn't go to class. We played sand volleyball. I like hung out with friends that they were not getting A's, but they didn't care either. And we kind of all figured out that we could just have fun during the school day. And anyway, so all that stuff to say, like, that wasn't winning. Like, what I thought was winning, I had believed some things that were false, and I thought I was winning. I got to grad school at MIT. It's a place where there's a lot of people who have had school come easily to them. And so all of a sudden, you're not the smartest person. In fact, everybody's struggling. And so I got this test back. I remember holding it in my hands. I think I kept the test. It's around here somewhere, but 13 points out of 39 possible points on this test, which is, for those of you doing math, like a third correct answers. That's like a 33% on a test. That's very, very bad for somebody who's used to 90%, on things. And so I just had this moment where it was like, uh-oh, I don't know this. Worse, I don't even know if I know how to get it, right? I'm missing knowledge and I don't know how to learn. And that was a panic moment for me. It was, my own little crisis. Fast forward a few years and I enter the real world and jobs, and it turns out I'm fine and I'm able to figure out how to do jobs and get promotions and do all of that stuff. Learning by that point had become very actionable for me. It was about accomplishing something, right? So at first it was like my first job, it was, here's a spreadsheet calculation that we need you to do. I was kind of working as an engineer for a consulting firm, and the spreadsheets, I had never used Excel before. It was my first time with spreadsheets, but I'm looking at this thinking, we're doing this on a computer, and I think computers are pretty good at this stuff. I didn't know much about Excel, so I had to go like learn how Excel works, learn how macros work. There's like a computer programming language inside of Excel, and it was like, oh, if I could just get the computer to do this for me, then I wouldn't have to do it anymore. So it was learning in a very real way. That involved a lot of internet research, a lot of trial and error, a lot of reaching out to random people that I didn't know, asking them questions, looking really dumb, doing things wrong. Like the learning process that we talk about today, I had to do all of that. It was worth it to me because eventually I figured out how to automate my job away. And then that, of course, gets you promoted. So, it was it was learning in a way that felt more real and tangible, and I just kept doing that over and over again in life. So all of that's the backstory. I had kind of done it the wrong way, I had done it the right way, and as I start to see my children of age, I'm thinking, what would I want for them? We could just do it the wrong way again, and just have them play the game. I start to see my kids doing those same behaviors, but what if we could do it in a way that really was about learning for themselves, for some sort of goal, for meaning and purpose, for creating, whatever it is that they want. And what if we could bring that to them even at age 8 or age 6 or, whenever, however old they are. So that was the real question. And that's the beginning then of starting to think about education and microschools and doing things differently. So it was a long answer to get there, but you said start at kindergarten, and that's what I did.
So much. That's what we wanted for sure. So some things that I am like just kind of observing that story that maybe have ended up being kind of long-term drivers for you are really switching from bare minimum thinking in your learning to like actually accomplishing something. Like you had a purpose in learning later in life that you didn't quite connect with personally. Like the purpose was to win in high school and in school versus the purpose was to learn and to like accomplish a real thing.
Yeah, I talk about it in the book, in terms of um, defining the game, right? Like you're always playing some game, but the game I was playing was defined for me, right? It was defined in part by that kindergarten teacher, in part by the syllabi of these various classes. It was defined in part by the way colleges calculate GPA and give you scholarships as a result. Like I was allowing other people to set the terms of this game I was going to play, and then I went in and played it. What I did after that later was I set the rules of the game, right? I said, this is what I want. This is the purpose for me. And it was so much more meaningful because it was, it was personal. It was connected to what truly mattered to me. And so you're right on to say it was about having purpose. And that's, incredibly motivating. I'm sure you guys have experienced that, and your children as well. When you're doing something because you choose it, it's pretty amazing.
And what would you say truly matters to you? What is at the root of Like, what's the driver to keep you going to create these learning environments for kids?
There's so many levels of that answer, right? Like I geek out on like the new, right? I want to innovate. I want to question the way things are. That's part of my personality, annoying at times to those around me. I think if you go even deeper, it's like I have this very deep sense of gratitude, I guess. I've been dealt a good hand of cards, and I've always kind of recognized that and felt that was true. And there was a time of my life when I was, kind of coming of age where that bothered me a lot. It was like the world's not fair, and it's not fair in my favor, and I don't know what to do about it. Like I was having all these kind of breakdowns and crises and things around all of this. I, by the way, haven't really reconciled it. I don't know why the world is the way it is. I don't know why I got dealt that good hand of cards. But the thing that I did walk away from with a lot of clarity was, if I have that, it's to do things for other people, and then the question becomes, what can you do with what you've got to help other people? And so that's where, okay, I know I think about things in unique ways. I know that I am obsessed with learning, right? Like, how can I take those things that are in my hand of cards and use them in a way that can hopefully help other people? And so that's where, I quickly landed on education. It's like I could try to go make a lot of money. That's what some people do, is like make a lot of money and give it away. That's one way to help. I could go just like devote my life to nonprofits and get clean water and medicine. I think there's lots of noble things, but for me, it was like, how can I think critically about the way the world works? How can we put things together and help people maybe in ways they haven't thought of before, and hopefully in a way that unlocks what's already sitting inside of them, which is the secret sauce of microschools and Prenda is all this energy and power comes from within people already, and all we're trying to do is help them get it out and harness it for whatever they want in their life.
Yeah, something that's really interesting to me about your story and about Prenda's story is just that, like, it's so normal, right? Like the story you just told us is not actually uncommon. Like that's a very common story that everyone feels that about school. Later in life we find our purpose. Like that's a pretty normal story. You've just run that path and then turned around to look at all the other people, all the kids that are running that path, and you've said, "Hey, maybe we could have run the path a little differently." And I think, a lot of people think Prenda started with microschools, but actually started before then. Do you want to tell us about Code Club and how that really got
Yeah,
started?
that's a great insight. So I had recently moved back home to Arizona. I grew up here. We live in the Phoenix suburbs. I Near where Kaity and Adriane live. And we had moved away, and I had done all these jobs and worked in all these various places doing technology. But coming back home, I had this opportunity to spend time with kids. My oldest son at the time we moved back was 8. And that's really the perfect age to enter the world of computer programming. In fact, I had always said my kids are going to learn chess and computer programming. And, to my great satisfaction, they have learned both. But instead of doing it just at home with the two of us, the idea there was like, why don't we make it fun and do it at the library and put up posters in the neighborhood and invite kids to come? So I'm not exactly sure like where all that came from. It was definitely not a goal to be a company or a movement or anything really. It was, the idea there was, let's have some fun once a week at the library, and hopefully some of these kids will learn some things that are important to them. I definitely didn't see myself as an educator right at the beginning, and over 5 years of doing that, I just saw some things. I got to witness kids become empowered learners. What we talk about now is empowered learners. I got to see the fire kindled for literally thousands of kids. They would come and they'd come back and they'd bring their friends. There was something very compelling about this learning environment, and they were doing things that were challenging, definitely, more of a cognitive burden than what they were getting at school. But these kids would tell me how awful school was and how they're failing at school. And then I'm watching them succeed here, and I'm thinking, what is it? What's going on structurally? And that led to a lot of the questions that ultimately turned into the first microschool, and then led to lots of microschools.
Yeah, what were some of those early learnings that you brought into, before you had your moment where, I think I've heard you say this before, that you realized like all of school could be like this, like Code Club. What were some of those principles that you noticed? The things that made kids love Code Club more than school?
It's a great question. I mean, we had a videographer come in one day and he just walked around and asked kids like, "What do you like about it?" And almost every one of them talked about their friends. So there was this immediate kind of collective social connection piece that was there from the beginning, right? Code Club wouldn't have worked if it was just me and one kid. I mean, that could have been me and my son at home. In fact, one of our good friends that helped with Code Club in the early days and became a critical part of Prenda's story in the early days, Andy Jennings, he had said, he's like, I tried to get my kids to learn to code, and Andy's a professional software developer and a genius and way better at all this stuff than I ever was. He's like, all of a sudden you come into town and do this thing, and my kids want to code, and it's like, well, that wasn't me. It was really an environment, a structure. It was a place where coding's cool, where learning's cool, and this is what we do. So the social, the group element to it is one for sure. I think I've talked about my experience trying to give lectures in Code Club. In the early days of Code Club, I got excited about things I wanted to teach them, and I brought my whiteboard marker and I got up there and I gave this great, just really clever lessons. And they had like activity, like a sample demonstration. I had like prepared all this stuff. I'd spent time on it. I turned around. I just remember looking at their faces, and it was like I was the Charlie Brown teacher, the wah 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 wah. And they were just glazed over, and it was like, I'm losing them. They're not going to come back. They don't like this. This isn't working. So really, the challenge was, how do we turn them into learners? By that point, I had already had all these experiences learning in the real world, where it was about taking ownership, connecting it to a purpose. And so the question was, how can I get kids into that seat, right, where they're the driver? So that was fun. I mean, I instead of lectures, I made challenge projects, and I would give them some parameters, sometimes deliberately designed to be things that I knew that they were not yet, they hadn't yet seen. So it was going to stretch them. And I would write it on the board and give them a chance to dive in and tackle it. And they did it with their friends. Of course, it was highly interactive, but you've got some of them over looking through tutorials, some of them frustrated, like doing trial and error, messing up a lot of times, and eventually, getting to this place where they're able to learn things. So at the time I thought, man, this is cool. This is how learning happens for me in my real life as an adult. And why doesn't this happen in school? Later, I found out that all this stuff is documented in education research. Like, people have known this stuff for a long time. Somehow we had like stumbled onto some radical discovery. I was even naming terms. Like, I was calling things, and it's like later I would go look at the literature, and it's like, oh, yeah, that, like, they already have that. There's studies about this. So the real question after that was not like, are these good ideas? It was like, why aren't these ideas adopted by everyone? And there's a lot of reasons for that. Yeah, that's really where the microschools came. It's like, okay, is this a way that we can bring truly empowering, like, student-centered learning with lots of inquiry and projects and personalization? Can we bring those things to lots and lots of kids? I think we've shown that yes, we can, and we're going to keep doing that for a very long time to come.
Yeah, I remember early days. So I started helping with Prenda in 2018 as Kelly was pivoting to micro schools. And I remember a lot of it was just done based on common sense. Like, well, we feel like it should feel like this, so this is how we're going to treat kids. And then later, like 6 months later, a year later, I would like stumble upon an article or TED Talk, and it would explain the 40 years of research behind what we had really like just done based on like common sense, fun, and like just parenting intuition, a lot of it. But I remember finding the book The Self-Driven Child, and I like read it, and this was it was published the same time you were running your Prenda pilot semester in the big the like January, March of 2018. But we didn't get it until 2020. And I read it and I was like, Kelly, this is like what we're doing. Like, there's science. Like, this is why everyone like is loving this and why kids are thriving. It's like we thought we'd like struck some magical like vein of gold or something. It's like, oh no, we're just doing science and no one else is applying the science.
It makes me wonder though, because it was pretty organic how it happened. And it makes me wonder, if you knew the literature before, knew how to do that, if that would have impacted what happened. Do you know what I mean? Because it's like organic, and then you were so intrinsically motivated to empower these learners. So I wonder, if you knew all these things existed, if that would have not been like your intrinsic motivation would not have been the same?
If we had known more about education, we would have been following along with like educational best practices of like what is happening in education, and we would have missed actually applying the research because sadly it's not just because that I mean it's to no fault of any teacher or administrator or anything like it's just the system isn't set up to like easily adopt all of these things that really work with kids. So
Yeah, I mean, so I tell the story in the book, and I just love the biography about the Wright brothers. These guys, were just obsessed, right? Watching birds and wondering if we can fly. And there were other people at the time that were also looking at things, and there was definitely like a body of literature and best practices that had existed and had been developed. So they spent a couple years doing gliders. I want to say it was like year 2 or something. They decided like, well, we should look, right? We should look at all the literature. We should read all the papers. We should apply all do all the calculations. And they did that, and they revamped their approach, and they went down to Kitty Hawk again. They were riding trains back and forth every season. So this was like, I think it was their second season, and they went with all these insights from science, right? And the problem was it was totally wrong. Like there was just a lot of it that didn't work for them at all. So it ended up being not that they threw it out completely, but it's this balance, right, in their story. You can hear this in the way they talk about it, of intuition. Like they had more flight hours than anybody because they were on these gliders and kites doing all the stuff themselves. Like they had actually like learned it by intuition, and then couple that with insights, that are random controlled trials and larger sample sizes and all these things. Like you can't do it. I think you can't do it one way or the other. I don't think it actually would work to just completely ignore all the data, but I also don't think you're ever going to get there from just all the data. It really requires, and this is part of what I say to people, right? They say, how could you possibly like start a micro school? It's like, you love kids and you're excited about learning, and like don't think too hard, like go do it. Like get in the glider and start flying. And yes, there will be some bumpy landings, like for sure, but you build this intuition, this connection, and maybe more importantly, you create these genuine like human experiences that will stay with you. I mean, I get overwhelmed like thinking about some of these amazing moments that I've had with younger people where they believed one thing that was false and that was limiting them, and then afterwards they believed something different that opened them up and empowered them. And if you think about what education truly can be, it's like it needs you. Like start a micro school, go do it. Like I don't want anybody to be just waiting around or saying, oh, that belongs to the professionals somehow. It's like, no, if you care about kids, like please get involved, join the work. There's so much to do.
I keep hearing you say empower learners or empower the students. And I know at Prenda, our mission is to empower learners. What exactly does that mean to you? And then also, how did you even come up with that?
So empower learners might be the most generic sounding mission statement for an education company. In fact, we worried about it at the time. Katie was there. We went to this very non-fancy basement office space that we rented from the city, and there was a whiteboard, and I said, I don't want paragraphs or semicolons in a mission statement. I want it to be something that's truly digestible from everybody. And I said, what are those 2 words? We tried on a lot of different ones. In fact, we talked, one that I remember sticking for a while, Katie, I don't know if you remember this, is we'd said create learners, right? Like let's create them. And we recognize that that's too strong of a word. It's not accurate. The learner exists already. In fact, learning is so fundamental to humanity that it was claiming too much to say we're somehow creating a learner. And so we tried on all these different things. The idea of a learner, I mean, as opposed to a pupil or a student or a widget on an assembly line, right? There's something truly just sacred. There's this amazingness to human being making a decision to learn and knowing how to do that. And the thing that just kept coming out from that is power, right? So being a real learner, the type that will continue to learn in the ways we've been talking about and you guys talk about every episode, being that kind of learner comes with power to accomplish not only your own personal goals, like living a life of meaning and purpose for yourself, but doing it with others and contributing and collaborating and making the world better. So it's really about a change in humans, and it's in some ways not a change at all. It's about just getting all the rest of the garbage out of the way so that it gets back to what humans are already set up to do. If you watch a baby, they are empowered learners from day one. And so we unfortunately are complicit in, stopping them from being learners. And all we're trying to say is, let's quit doing that and let's design education in a way that truly empowers learners, like helps them be that.
It sounds so complicated and scary almost to think like, well, to change education or to change a child's experience. But then we go back to our kindergarten coloring stories and it's like, oh, just an offhanded comment from someone has like life trajectory changing. It's that easy actually to say something different to a child, to put them in a different learning experience, to make different assumptions about them. And that's what they're going to grow up in. And so it really is, it's been wonderful. So when we started Prenda, I think I only had 3 kids then. They were all tiny and I was homeschooling and I knew some of this stuff, right? And I knew about growth mindset. And so I was trying to get my little kids to have growth mindset. And I remember Walter, when he was like 5, he was a kindergartner, but we hadn't started like the K2 version quite yet. He was about to start and he spilled some strawberries and he just looked at me and I'm going to cry talking about this, but he's just like, you probably don't want me in your family anymore. Like literally that came out of his mouth as a 5-year-old because he'd spilled some strawberries. And I'm like, man, I am gunning it all day long on this growth mindset stuff, like trying to get him to feel like all wrapped up and like, and I send him to a micro school who, like, Miss Tiffany was his guide. This is like the first semester we tried like the K2 program. And she is literally reading things that I wrote in the guide training, doing them with my kids every day. And they come back to me several weeks later. Walter spills some more strawberries. And he looks at me and he's like, that's okay. It's my job to make mistakes. And I was just like, yes, thank you for growth mindsetting my child for me after I couldn't do it myself. So it definitely takes a village. Like it does. I love that community feel in a micro school where there's so much social proof for kids that like, oh yeah, it is okay to make mistakes and I am safe when I mess up and like everyone makes mistakes and I'm running my own race. Like all of the things that we are trying to embed in this culture so kids will grow up with empowered beliefs instead of limiting beliefs. It's really incredible to see that. Thank you, Kelly, for starting Prenda because I live it every day in my home, and it's just been so. It's a wonderful way to raise kids and to do school. So I don't have to homeschool anymore. Thanks.
Yeah, I completely agree with Katie. Prenda, and just this even idea that school could be different than just sending your kids and they're gone all day long and they're just being told what to do and there's not a lot of autonomy or agency. And it really has changed my family, my kids, just the way we interact with each other. And so thank you so much. We just have just this stronger, connection. And so what I would love to know, like, what is the Prenda's footprint? How many people has this impacted since you started, and like where we go from here?
Yeah, so we had kind of gone from that. We talked about the Code Club, the after school programs. We actually started a bunch of after school programs and helped libraries all over. So I think we reached something like 10,000 kids at one point. I added it up one day of kids that I had personally worked with, and it was pretty close to 2,000 through the after school program. So that was fun. Did it over 5 years. Got to this point where I said, what about this would apply to regular school? Or another way to put it, Katie, you said this already. Another way to put this is, why can't school be like this, right? I'm seeing these amazing results. And so that was what got me to the point that, my friends and family would call truly crazy, of starting a micro school in my house. That was the spring semester of 2018. There were 7 kids. One of them was my son, Asher. We put this group together with 5th, 6th, 7th graders. And it was truly an astonishing semester. I mean, just taking that leap and seeing these changes, on the student, from the student perspective, I felt very convinced after having seen each of these kids, and they were different kids. Like some of them were the hyper overachievers, like coming from very competitive charter schools that were driven around results. Some of them had been homeschooled, were maybe having some academic gaps, some places where they weren't feeling strong, not a lot of confidence. And each of these kids had breakthrough moments where you got to see them really try on what it feels like to be a learner and take those steps. So having seen it work for that kind of smattering of 7 kids, I was excited, right? The question is, why can't this be the experience for lots more people? And meanwhile, the parents are thrilled, right? They're seeing their children come back to life. Parents know what it looks like when your child's going through the motions or they're frustrated. A lot of parents that come to Prenda still to this day have had that moment in the car outside of the school where the kid's crying and the parents practically crying and the kid's saying, "Don't make me go in there." And the parent kind of knows, like, your questions, like, is this really the right move for my child, right? That's not a pleasant feeling. And I'm not saying everybody should, do it to stop their kids from crying, but there's times where it's pretty clear that this isn't the right environment. This isn't leading your child where you want them to go. And so all of that kind of swirling around, how can we help other people start micro schools? The other thing that I learned in 2018 was, I love kids. I feel like I have energy. I definitely care about learning, but I didn't have any expertise. Like, I didn't bring into it some sort of, academic pedigree or certification or, years of experience. Those weren't the things that helped me to be successful there. And what that led me to is this question of who else is out there that could make a life altering impact on young people, right? Hopefully, somebody's listening to this right now thinking, I could make a life altering impact on young people, right? Like, you can. And that's the astonishing thing. To date, we have helped over 1,000 people start micro schools all over the United States. We've even gone outside of the United States in a few cases. And we are continually just obsessing over how we can help people start micro schools. I mean, that's what the business does. That's what we are. And it includes software and curriculum and resources and training and tools for running a good academic program, but it also includes help, on the business side and helping manage payments and money and recruiting people for your micro school. This isn't a sales pitch for Prenda, but putting that all together, I mean, that's really what we're about. Is we want to see lots more people step up and start a micro school, whether that's in their home, church, community center, dance studio, wherever they are. Kids need this option, right? There's a lot of kids out there that would really thrive in an environment like this. So that's what Prenda, the company, is, and that's what we're continually obsessing over.
So when I found you in 2018, I Facebook messaged you and like soon thereafter, like drove myself to your house and knocked on your door and sat at your kitchen table for several hours and like grilled you essentially to see what this was and what your intentions were and like all these things. And I left that knowing like, so I was a speech language pathologist in schools. And so I've sat in kind of like the educator mode, the parent mode, and I've seen the teacher mode. And it's like, wow, so many people not thriving in this situation. And then when I was sitting at your kitchen table, which is the same kitchen table that you had your first micro school around, I had this moment where I just saw like, wow, like this solves the kids' problem. This solves an overwhelmed teacher's problem. This solves both a homeschooling parent's need for more community and more support, and also a parent who is maybe sending their kids to public or charter school who feels like they don't have a voice or they don't have any control. Like it's like this little equation has the potential to solve a lot of problems. And then it's like, well, but it's just 10 kids. Like that's not a solution to our national education question here. And what most people do when they find something like you had, and you're like, this is working, they might want to get a building and add more kids and make the school bigger. But I think that it's the microness of the micro school that is actually the magic. And so genius idea to scale the idea laterally and invite other people in their communities to be the solution to the issues they were seeing as teachers in classrooms, as parents in their homes, and really being able to give a tool, like an empowerment tool to the world that it's not a top down one size fits all solution. It's like an organic grassroots thing that a parent or a teacher or a coach or anyone could take hold of the tools we built at Prenda and reimagine, add to, get creative with, create a unique space for kids where the same culture and vibe exists, and probably with a lot less effort than it was when you first started, getting the first one off the ground. We've systematized things. It is like you're saying, it's easier to pick up.
It's always effort for sure. But it doesn't have to be, yeah, do everything from scratch. Like there are pieces of this that can be solved and that would be applicable everywhere. Yeah, my favorite thing about it is each person does it their way, right? They bring themselves to it. It's about as personal as it gets, right? It's my heart and the hearts of these children. And that's something that I couldn't have predicted, even though I did have a picture in my head of lots of people doing microschools. As I've gone out and met these people, and I see in every visit at least one way, and usually lots of ways, where this person's doing it way better and different than I ever did or ever conceived of. And so you have these kids getting these great experiences all over the place. It's really exciting to me. Just asking the question of who's out there in the world that loves children, like so many people raising their hand mentally, and it's like now giving them more ability to have that impact, to be the day-to-day guide, coach, mentor, support for young people. I mean, that that's an overwhelming vision, but it's so exciting to think where this could go.
Yeah, and the students are getting personalized education, but also that guide, the person leading it, there's so much personalization and individualization for them to be able to run these schools. What I find so incredible, you walk in, Katie and I talk about, and she used the word magic. It's like there's like this Prenda magic. I don't know if we want to, hone in on that word, but you walk in, it's just like the environment, the flexibility, the community. I can't tell you how many microschools I go in and you could just feel it. And because of that strong connection and the strong community that these kids have, like you kind of said with Code Club, is the kids were really excited to have their friends there, is that then the learning can happen because their brains are safe enough to be able to get to that place. And just being able to walk into a classroom and just seeing how excited the kids are to learn. I walked into Katie's kids micro school a couple of weeks ago and they were doing a debate, and I've never seen like kids ages third through, or is it third through fifth ish? Yes, so excited to argue their point about mercantilism. I didn't even know what mercantilism was.
You're passionate about it. It's important.
So passionate about it. It was absolutely incredible. And the reason why is because they have the space to be able to dive into these topics that they are discovering and then becoming passionate about.
And they bring all of that home to the dinner table and we have great discussions. The other day, there was some game thing and I was like helping, we were playing a game and I was helping a little sibling with something and Walter was just like, is that protectionism? Like quoting some other like thing that he like learned in history class with Miss Emily. And I'm just like, yep, you're right. It is. I'm sorry. I will let the free market reign. It was great. So yeah, something that I think all the time is like about this question of like, are all microschools the same? You just have to. Is there flexibility? Is there uniqueness? Like, absolutely, because the last thing we would ever want to do in the education space is create another one size fits all system. So like Prenda in itself is like a very flexible, personalized like learning system, I guess you could call it, but it's built to be changed and altered. And we built it in a way where you can really use it to address the needs of your community. So that's one of my favorite things to see too, Kelly. You pointed out just like how different all of the microschools are. It's so fun.
And so much of it, like you just said, Katie, spills over into home life. And it really is transforming the whole family unit, not just, oh, they just go to school for 7 hours, they're under someone else's care, and then they come home and it's like separated. It's like all encompassing it. Like, I feel like that is really powerful too. So, what do you think then, Kelly, that gets in the way of guides or potential guides when they're trying to help kids become empowered learners?
There's multiple things. I'm going to do kind of 3 layers. So let's start with layer 1 is permission, right? There's a mental narrative. There's even, in some cases, laws and structures that's like the only way you're allowed to have an impact on helping a kid learn English or math or science is if you have gone to one of these schools that we've approved, you've achieved these degrees, you've gotten this certificate, and you've been employed by one of these entities. I would say even beyond that, there's so much around just our own thought process. Like, well, I couldn't do that. It would be this, 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 and we make it into this big impossible thing. I mean, so much of what we're doing is saying, start a micro school, and people are like, okay, where do I get my LLC and I do this? It's like, no, go talk to some families. I just talked to a mom yesterday. It's like, she's got triplets. It's awesome. I was like, you've got 3 kids already. Go talk to your friends and be like, who wants to do this with me? And let's do a little meeting and let's put this together. There's this power in permission, right? To just be able to say, we can do this. We can create an astonishing thing. And the rules vary depending on where you go, but there are definitely places like Arizona where it's actually great for this. You can create a micro school and just do it. So that's kind of the first thing that gets in the way. People either talk themselves out of it or believe that they don't have the permission to do it. I think once you have permission, you need tools, right? And there's this idea of what do you tell people? Kaity just told a story about how to talk about growth mindset, language around that. How do we actually approach learning the English language arts standards for 4th grade? It's like, probably if you're not coming from a deep elementary education background, you don't know what that is or where to find it. So getting those tools in place and just feeling like, okay, I know how to do this. I've got an approach, not only to sort of hit all the main topics, but to do it in a way that empowers and supports kids. That gets to the third, and I think hardest one. And I say this, and I'm hesitate a little bit to even say it because I think I don't want people feeling bad, but it's really deep and it's in your own mind. How do you see children, right? Like, how do you see human beings around you? I think if we're honest, even the most optimistic and loving and supportive people get into modes where we don't really believe in them. We don't believe they're capable of it. We see them as a nuisance. We see them as this or that. And so to truly honor this fundamental aspect of their humanity, recognizing their value intrinsically, recognizing their potential, what they're capable of. We have this value called start with heart, and it's so critical. Children have x-ray vision. They can see right through all of our little like tactics and techniques and posters on the wall. I mean, this is why I think so many kids go to school in a structure with adults who I think are good people, but no, they realize that they're not truly seen or understood or appreciated as a human. And people are like, oh, they're just being dramatic and that teacher's nice. I'm sure the teacher's nice, but like, they're not, right? And the kid knows it. And so I think the question is, can you get to a place where you can see not a class, where you can see 10 individual humans that are in your care, and you're going to help them become empowered learners. You're going to be there with them when things are hard, because it's inevitably going to be hard. You're going to walk them through these things. So you need to use all the tools, but the tools themselves aren't going to do it if you're in a mode of just like, when is lunch, and I want to go complain about them in the teacher's lounge. So I think as you can get to this, if you can get to this place, and again, this is like super hard to ask people to do. I mean, I think it's really pushing on human nature in ways that feel very abrupt and uncomfortable. But that at its core, like, that's the fundamental kind of limit to what you're really going to be able to do for someone. And this is, on the flip side, this is where the beautiful stories happen, whether that's in a traditional classroom or you hear this about a coach or an adult mentor. If you can get to a point where you truly see them that way and treat them that way, they notice it, and you have now the ability to do astonishing things for them in their life.
Absolutely. All right, it's time to wrap up. Kelly, we ask this of all of our guests. Who is someone who's kindled your love of learning, curiosity, or perseverance, purpose?
I got to give this one to my dad. I remember him telling me about this thing called physics when I was like 8. And I literally was like, okay, well, why aren't they teaching me this in school? Like, what's going on? He's like, oh, well, I think in college, it turned out I was able to take it in high school, but I was like mad that I had to wait. I mean, I was that interested. My dad also was incredibly supportive of some of my entrepreneurial tendencies. We did a little business together when I was 7 where we were renting out video games to people, just supportive all around. So I gotta throw that one to my dad, as somebody who's a learner himself and has always been very supportive of helping me be that as well.
I love that. Thanks for sharing.
Thank you so much, Kelly. This is amazing. Every time you talk about the Prenda origin story, I just find so much gratitude that you went for it and you listened to your gut and your intuition. So we also hope you, as our listeners, enjoyed this episode of the KindlED Podcast. If this episode was helpful to you, please like, subscribe, and follow us on social at Prenda Learn. If you have a question you'd like for us to address, just leave us a comment or email us at podcast@prenda.com. You can also join our Facebook group, the KindlED Collective, and subscribe to our weekly newsletter. It is called The Sunday Spark.
The KindlED Podcast is brought to you by Prenda. Prenda makes it easy for you to start and run an amazing microschool based on all the things we talk about here on the KindlED Podcast. If you want more information about guiding a Prenda microschool, just go to prenda.com.
Thanks for listening, and remember to keep kindling.